Hello, everyone. In front of me are the creatives, the entrepreneurs, and the innovators who will build the metaverse and build it for everyone. I mean, you are interested enough in a conversation about diversity in the metaverse to commit at least the next 45 minutes of your life to listening to us talk about it. So thank you for that, because it's an incredible opportunity. You will ultimately help create the change that we up here on stage are going to talk about today. Tech organizations of all sizes are more interested and financially invested than ever in issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion, yet the creators and producers in the metaverse continue to be predominantly white, predominantly male, and predominantly based on the West Coast of the United States. So despite the clear intention of well-meaning business leaders and executives, we can already see that the same systems of inequality that exist in our physical world are being replicated online. So what can we do to approach things differently in order to get the next 10 years right? In order to talk about that, I'm delighted to bring together 4 expert creatives. First, I'd like to introduce Danielle Brathwaite-Shirley, an artist who principally works in sound, performance, and video game. Her projects seek to create an archive for the Black trans experience, intertwining lived experience with fiction to imaginatively retell Black trans stories. She made last year's Paula magazine's 40 Under 40 art and tech list, and her work has been described as an uncompromising, necessarily unhinging, and ultimately welcome eruption of game design into a gallery context. Next to Danielle are the dynamic duo behind science meets tech meets fashion couture brand Auroboros. Paula Sello and Alissa Aulbekova founded Auroboros in 2020 and took last year's London Fashion Week by storm with the launch of their digital ready-to-wear collection. Since then, they have launched collaborations with artists like Grimes, made the Forbes Europe 30 Under 30 Arts and Culture list, and appeared on digital platforms alongside brands like Gucci and Prada as 2 of the leading voices in digital fashion. And last but never least, I am honored to introduce Jude Kelly, CBE. Jude is an award-winning theater director and the CEO and founder of the WOW Foundation, which operates the Women of the World Festival. WOW celebrates the achievements of women and girls and confronts global gender equality at summit events in 30 locations around the world. And Jude's TED Talk on why women should tell the stories of humanity has been viewed 1.2 million times. Finally, my name is Maggie Schroeder. I am an account director at Boster Group. For over 20 years, Boster Group has been pioneering cross-sector partnerships that promote innovation. And we genuinely believe that it is through partnership, UN SDG 17, that the biggest challenges we face will be tackled. With that in mind, I'm delighted to turn to Danielle to open up our conversation. So your practice revolves around archiving the Black trans experience through video games. So that's you've said that that's a response to the dearth of historical records about Black trans people, Black trans experiences. Can you speak? Yes.
I think there's something playing that.
Yeah. Can we turn down the sound a little bit? We don't want to steal the show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So could you talk to us about the opportunity you see in using the metaverse to archive experiences, and also what such archives enable?
Right. Yeah, so for me, I saw the problem with the archive is that it's the foundation on which archives are built on. So usually an archive is built using money in order to finance the acquiring and storing of certain types of work that is interested by the governing body or whoever is funding the archive. But something about digital archives is that you get to build that foundation yourself. You begin at the bottom with the idea of what you want within the code, and you build a landscape on top of that in order to accommodate those you want to archive. So my problem was the archive was essentially erasing people by not correctly archiving them or using the same sort of violence to archive existing individuals. And so, for example, the only archiving or restored or recorded history of a Black trans woman in 1836 is someone called Mary Jones, and it's the thing of archiving her is a poster warning people away from her. And so it's extremely violent, it's very disruptive, and so my aim was to build an archive that seeks to archive Black trans people in the present, so that the hope is that those in the future may have something to build up on. And I think that that's why these metaverses, or essentially digital environments curated from the bottom up with a team that starts that conversation from the code to the end product and the user experience, you archive not only the experience, but also the entire navigation of building a structure that can hold a particular voice.
Fantastic. So what we're watching and listening to now, by the way, is Auroboros' fabulous, fabulous brand. But before we get to you guys, Jude, Danielle's practice from...
Sorry, guys. Can we turn the music down?
Turn the music down.
Just turn it off, please.
That would be awesome. Guys, can we maybe get thumbs up if you can hear us through your headsets over the music? Oh, perfect, perfect. So, Jude, Danielle's practice reminds me of your TED Talk and the story you used to illuminate the idea that if women's stories are not interpreted as universally significant, then we as a society will cease to remember that women told stories at all. And that is something that really resonates with kind of what Danielle's trying to do. However, Danielle's unapologetic about the fact that part of her work is for Black trans people.
Yep.
How do you think about the line between what you talk about with the universal significance of underrepresented storytellers and acknowledging that it is okay and actually important for work to be unapologetically created for women, for people of color, and for LGBTQ plus communities, other underrepresented groups?
Okay, could we turn the sound down, please?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, because this actually relates to them.
Yeah.
They're fantastic. But actually, I want to pick up on exactly what you just said.
Thank you.
I just want to loop back a little bit around the kind of why we're discussing this. And I'll start with the fact that we came in, you might not have recognised it, was a Diana Ross piece of music that you'd chosen. And I was at an event the other day where the sister of Valerie Amos, who's just been made Order of the Garter, said that when she met Diana Ross at the Jubilee concert, she sort of practically fell on the floor before her and thanked her because she said, when I was a little black girl growing up in Gloucester, we were the only kind of black girls in our school. Because Diana Ross was the head of the Supremes, and because the Supremes were such like a big band, they let her be Diana Ross in their gang. And she said this got her through her childhood. Being able to be included because Diana Ross existed and she was a little black girl. And what that really was saying was that a story existed out there that spoke of her and other people respected her because of this story. And I say that because one of the things I absolutely believe is that, you know, you have that old-fashioned phrase now, if you can't see it, you can't be it. But it's so much more than that. If you can't see it, you don't have human rights. Human rights are related to where you stand on the kind of spectrum of people's sense of who's got an important story and who's got a less important story. Now, obviously, you can see that as a cisgendered white woman, which is what I am, my story has been marginalised not as much as your story. But it's still the case that, as far as I'm concerned, I grew up my whole life being told that I had a woman's story, which essentially meant I didn't have a humanity story. I had a story that related to being a woman, and that was a kind of niche space. And if you think about how that relates in terms of structural, patriarchy, and then if I was a woman of colour, how it relates to racism, or if I was disabled, or if it's LGBTQ+, all of this means that your story gets more and more niche. And that directly relates to what right you have to speak, not just on behalf of the whole of humanity, but even to have your voice heard at all. And the thing is that there isn't really anything different about human rights in the metaverse than there is in any other situation. You are literally talking about who's making space for whom. And that is entirely to do with power. It's entirely to do with who's in control of the spaces. Now, as an older person, I'm probably one of the oldest people in the room. I remember, that when the kind of the metaverse, or there's this whole space was kind of coming towards us, the idea of utopia was being sold to us, as in this is going to be the place where it'll be so liquid and so porous, everybody can come into it and everybody's voice will be equal. I mean, that's absolutely naive for us to have believed that. I did believe it. That's because I am naive. But what, of course, you quickly understand is that it isn't just commerce that appropriates space and reorders it in order to sort of sell it back to you in conventional contexts. But it's actually also entitlement. It's people who feel entitled already who will just walk in and take the biggest space. And I mean, leaving aside digital absence all over the world, you know, and digital poverty, you also have just a kind of sense of what is normal. And what is normal is to retain the structures of storytelling as they currently have. Now, and just to finish on this, in theatre, where, as in other parts of the creative expanse, we're having really complicated conversations about, do you keep the whole canon going, which is mainly white, European and colonial? Do you keep it going and then just kind of explain it in a new context? And at what point do you start, you know, zero, from now on it won't be like that? It just doesn't work that way. And so I think that we have an enormous amount of disruption to do, which we can only do by understanding the politics of power.
Fabulous. Awesome. That was a fantastic answer. So Auroboros, we have been enjoying some of the previews of your incredible collection, your incredible designs. Your brand really revolves around craftsmanship in the digital world. Couture is a really interesting place, though, because it is at the bleeding edge of fashion. It is usually incredibly expensive, and it's rarely considered something approachable, even though fashion is something we wear all the time. Yet the crux of your ethos is that couture should be both rarefied and accessible. What does that mean, and how does metaverse technology enable that in a way that was previously impossible?
I mean, as we are creating a brand for the 21st century, for this generation, for the next one, we wanted to take our ethos and really showcase that with our work and include more people. Couture never used to be an open access story or even the way you present your brand. So the way we're positioning right now is we as founders, as females, are actually facing forward. We're there with our community, we're co-creating, and we also hear the people of how they want to, you know, imagine the future with us. So it's not dictating the vision, but actually creating it cohesively so people can be seen and involved.
Yeah. I think in terms of couture and craftsmanship, specifically for us, couture really in and of itself is an art form. It's not really about the exclusivity, but of course it became exclusive over the duration of the last century. And that's again now, couture doesn't have to have that exclusivity at all. It's modernizing it. It's bringing it into the 21st century and looking at where craftsmanship even comes from. I mean, the craftsmanship in the physical world within fashion comes from, you know, seemingly the ateliers of Chanel in France, but that's not even where it comes from. So it's recontextualizing what it means to be a craftsman nowadays, where it comes from. I mean, even within our team, we work across, I mean, pretty much all of the continents and countries at this point. So it's making sure that there's not just on the front, but behind the scenes, the people, the creators who are bringing that vision and that beauty and that art to the metaverse. So, I mean, one of the ways in which we make sure to be accessible to people is that, for example, what we did with our London Fashion Week showcasing is we presented QR codes around London where you could actually scan the QR code and wear one of the pieces yourselves and try it on. So for a couture house, quote unquote, to give away assets for people to collectively try on and wear and test is quite, I would say, a revolutionary step when you look back at where fashion has been for the past 20 years. I mean, similarly at the Victoria and Albert Museum, we presented the physical side of our collection where, again, classically couture would be shown, and the craftsmanship, the innovation of these pieces would be shown behind closed doors. And here we showed it to, the public. And we wanted to present it in a way, almost the way in which the light bulb was first presented. It was about showing innovation and beauty, and for everyone to be able to see it. So at the Victoria and Albert, we presented the world's first real-time growing dress. This is not a digital piece. This was the physical side of our collection, actually. And so we had people who would come in and obviously see the dress growing over that week, but they would also be able to then wear a digital piece of that garment. So it's really thinking about, how elements of craftsmanship can also be shared with an audience that has never been possible before due to obviously physical means. If you're creating artwork, it's very difficult to be able to share that and produce it in thousands. So it's also thinking about how, in a sense, more people can access that. And I think especially, just to quickly close off on that, and especially for us, when we grew up across the world, Alissa growing up in Kazakhstan as well, the only access we had to fashion and through wearable art was through the internet. And so it's taking that optimism and that beauty and trying to share it with everyone.
I mean, also there's so many tools out there for building, future, and we really wanted to utilize that and showcase innovation. How can you, be part of something new using the latest technology, whether it's in science or, AR tools or even the metaverse.
And can I just ask, because with WOW, which is digital and live, but we work a lot with First Nations communities, and they're working a lot on their fashion design, etc., etc. And taking your point about appropriation, I mean, what seems to be fantastic about this is that, in a sense, you're also providing the tools for people to build their own design framework, owning their own culture, and putting it back into the fashion world, but making sure it's not being appropriated, it's being spoken from first base. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's about obviously who we work with as well. It's about making sure that from the ground up, it's built by people who understand the culture, who understand the background. I think with a lot of avatar projects, even there was recently a black avatar project where it was found out later on that it was a white man who was actually creating this model and obviously profiting from her image. And when there's such little space already for black models in the real world, let alone then in the digital world, it's already thinking about who is creating these pieces, where they come from, and who is leading the way into creatively, visually, the new era of fashion.
And transparency at all.
Exactly.
I think there's so much accountability to be taken in the internet, which is an anonymous space, and being the founders of our brand, we actually go forward and we speak, to our community members, to our customers, because we think it's very important to have the right representation and transparency in terms of what we're building for the future.
And that's a really interesting point, because Jude and I had spoken before about kind of access in digital environments and how with Web 2.0 we saw that there is so much good that can come from that, and it can help people from underrepresented groups come together, find common stories, share common stories, but it can also do that for misogynists and racial supremacists and other extremists of all stripes. So Jude, when you think about all of the potential and the access that companies like Auroboros are trying to create, you mentioned that maybe what's missing really is the sense of purpose behind how these tools are being built. How do you think that the people building metaverse ecosystems could take active steps to build their platforms and tools with a stronger sense of social purpose than maybe they did with Web 2.0?
Well, I suppose this is the same question you would ask whether you're in the metaverse or the real world, isn't it? Which is that everybody is responsible and accountable for the society we live in. And to kind of almost like dislocate yourself from that responsibility is an illusion. I mean, there's this very famous, very old phrase, the personal is political. And people often say, what in the hell does that mean? But it really means that, you can't really do anything. What you don't do is also political, in the sense that if you're not fighting for change, then you'll maintain the status quo. But I think that what is interesting about, if you like, the tech world is that it's almost been perceived as a place where the part of the brain that is about program, kind of form and frame, doesn't need to have politics inside it. It doesn't need to have social action inside it. And I think that is a massive absence, because people are quite nervous of the arts. I mean, just to give an example, when COVID hit in Hungary, the very first political decision that Orbán made in Hungary was to change the structure of all the theatres and the arts organisations in Hungary. They're so frightened of the arts as a storytelling space. But he didn't go in and do something similar in the tech world, because actually the tech world is quite obedient in a strange sort of way. So I think it's about everybody in the tech world realising that they're actually at the absolute frontier, well, you know that, the frontier of either battening down the hatches on the social structures we've got or liberating it further. And everybody has to be involved in that. So that's really about conversations like this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and Danielle, you previously said that you build your websites, where your archives live as sites of empowerment. So how can people of any background who are thinking about building these ecosystems, these environments, who are building the metaverse, how can they build sites of empowerment in that kind of active way?
Yeah, like I want to go quickly back to a point that you were talking about, and I would call it like terms and conditions of particular sites. So Instagram have a particular set of terms and conditions which moderate the content on the service, which change constantly depending on the apolitical, political conversations that they're having behind the scenes. And each kind of MMOs have been doing this for years, but that's a big question around the metaverse is what is the background conversation that will then limit the type of community engagement that can happen? Because the communities will build the platform and start building what the metaverse can do, and then companies will start restricting on what type of content is the most sellable. And then you'll see a change in how that community can then interact and which community can grow and which community disappears on the metaverse. I really believe in like an open source terms and conditions and moderation process of explaining why particular things aren't available on the platform. Like similar to like AR art, a lot of AR platforms have to be approved. The type of art has to be approved before it goes onto these social media sites. And this approval process usually is encouraging apolitical art. It's usually not wanting it to say a particular thing. It's usually encouraging art that can be accepted by everyone, which is in itself a political action. And so these are conversations that we never have. Like I actually haven't heard the conversation in the metaverse talking about what it means to shape a community using art and what it means to restrict particular people within that community. I mean, YouTube do it too, that these algorithms do it in order to, for example, promote certain things at certain times. I'm sure this month we'll be having a lot of LGBT stuff being promoted because the algorithm will say, hey, this is the month to promote this stuff, but make sure you stop at the end of the month. You know, but it's important to know the type of conversations going into that structure. And I don't think we've ever, I mean, hands up, it'll be great. Has anyone seen a moderation process for an online platform actually take place in front of their eyes? And that is wild, because we all see government, we can all see how wild our government is, and we can see the mistakes they make live. And the same process happens in these metaverse spaces. There is a governing body governing your actions within these spaces. There is, you know, Club Penguin has a particular type of censorship. When they invented their own server, they had many issues on the type of people doing the moderation. Moderation is one of the most important things in order to protect children, in order to protect people, in order to make people's voices heard. So you cannot have a metaverse that includes the people and growth without having the voices of everyone within the moderation process. A moderation process should never be the same and should never be in a board. It should always be community-based and open source topic. So the reason I build websites is because the websites are built with a set amount of people We build the website for them and for their community. And so each game that we make is completely different because it has to be. We can't have the same process to say the different things to different people because it doesn't work. And so that's why I fully believe in building them and not just using platforms that already exist, because you have the control and the ability to change it. And I also believe that revisiting something that games do amazingly is they see a game and they see the potential. Maybe it was made 20 years ago, like the Resident Evil remake, and they say, let's remake it using the tools of today so that our new community can understand it and the old community also feels held. And I feel like we need to take a similar approach in the metaverse and understanding that things need to be redone. The same questions need to be asked again, and people need to be revisited in order to make sure we're doing the right thing.
And so there's tons of people in the room here who actually get to have an input on those kinds of conversations. To you, what would be like the role of partnership or allyship in helping to build those, and maybe helping to, I can only imagine building those websites takes a huge amount of time and effort. Is there a role for partnership or allyship in that, or do you think it really should, each one should have its own structure?
No, I think like there definitely is a role for partnership, but it should be at that level. Like often when we get partnership from these larger companies, it's at a particular level which is almost near the end. They ask you to do whatever you're doing, to put on a show, whatever, which is amazing, but you're not in the room to determine what thing is allowed to go on Instagram or what post you're allowed to put on YouTube. You're not in the room there. The process of like a lot of YouTubers have a problem with which of their content gets flagged and copyright protection and misuse of copyright protection. And none of the YouTubers are in the room having that kind of conversation. So I think like that conversation, that opening of that, even if you don't take everything that everyone says, just having people in there, having people understand how difficult moderation actually is in order to keep people safe, in order to keep free speech available. Just having that open conversation and dialogue with the people who are on your platform already doing amazing things will essentially make your platform better for the community you're already aiming at. And also knowing that in each of these huge social media platforms and these metaverses, there are pockets. And allowing those pockets to grow and allowing different kind of rules and moderations for countries, pockets, and understanding the cultural relevance of particular words here and particular words there.
Yeah, absolutely. Jude, you want to?
Well, I was going to say that I mean, I think this is incredibly exciting, because we don't know how to do this. You know, we've got the world that we're in, and we're at this is the most modern we are today. This is the most modern day that's ever existed in the whole world today. So what are we going to do with all the days that are left to all of us to move into the modern day that's in 50 years' time? We don't know how to make an equal world. You know, we haven't the faintest idea, but then we didn't know how to build algorithms either. And I want it to be as exciting, to be baffled and puzzled and perplexed by this idea of building a different egalitarianism, as some people are excited by thinking, how do you do the coding to do such and such and such a thing? And I think that sometimes the worry about this kind of conversation is that it sounds like people are being told off, or, you know, people should feel guilty. Or I don't think any of that. I just think this is the day that we're in. But we do know, if we look around us, that we're not equal. And how do we use this incredible technology and play with it in order to make this world in 50 years' time? And you know, that seems to me to be one of the most thrilling things that we can do, even though we haven't the faintest idea how to do it.
Well, Auroboros, you guys are building an online community, and you are looking at things like NFTs, which are historically nearly impossible for Black creators to get involved with. Working in Metaverse Couture, I can only imagine that things like community, which is so key to the metaverse, but also, you know, NFTs and market factors are both at the top of your mind, and you're actively trying to figure that out. How are NFTs impacting your work and the stories that you tell?
I just wanted to mention, obviously, everything that's been brought up on this panel is that we acknowledge, and also we grew up with the internet, and it has been a very dystopian conversation. It has hardly been, you know, we have all these magnificent tools, how do we build something better? And at the moment, what we've experienced in the industry is that it's been a marketing tool, and I think we can all agree it's past that. If you can actually focus on building the right community, making it fruitful, having everybody seen and heard, it's going to be way more lasting, and people are going to be willing to actually enjoy the space. And for us, everything that we do, it's kind of been a rebellion or revolution of actual positivism and being more utopian about the ideas. Although, yes, it's a bit naive, but we have to be building something better for us. Otherwise, there's no vision to go to.
Agreed. I think it's really interesting actually hearing from you saying, you know, people said to me, oh, it's going to be this utopian, amazing place. And for us, you know, I mean, also with TV shows and just so much of the media that we were growing up with, technology was kind of always seen as this evil, you know, big brother. And, well, to a certain extent, that's, you know, that's kind of what we grew up with. It's true with social medias and all of the, you know, also the fact that we don't really have a lot of visibility from, you know, behind the scenes. I think it's so important to say that. But I think actually speaking into existence a future that we want to see is how we're going to create that vision in 50 years. What do we want to see? Well, let's talk about it. You know, let's not... you know, I think also within our generation, a lot of people obviously growing up with social media, it's also had certain psychological impacts on us. You know, all of these things have been factored into the way in which we talk about technology, and especially AI and algorithms and whatever else. You know, it's kind of, it's seen as something often very scary and, oh, I don't want anything to do with that. And so that's, again, for us, very, very important within our community. Who we speak to and how we speak about technology is always positive. You know, yes, realistic, but positive, and really manifesting what we want. And obviously manifesting and speaking with people, you know, such as yourselves, to make sure that it is aligned with what's happening, and also then, you know, pushing as well.
And what about the way you represent yourself to that community? Because I think there's something very particular, and I want to leave enough time for Q&A, that you guys wanted to talk about today.
Okay, so this is the queue. Please.
If you don't mind showing it on the screen right now.
There we go. So this is really exciting for us. This is the first reveal that you're seeing today of our avatars. So we've been talking a lot today about accountability, visibility, representation,
identity.
And transparency, most importantly. And people right now, we feel and have spoken to with so many people from the kind of outside looking into digital fashion or the metaverse and surrounding topics, people are very almost, I would say, scared, because there doesn't seem to be a face at all. It's, you know, the you know, people from social medias who are the face right now, previous leaders of, you know, Facebook, whatever else, who have been the face of the metaverse so far. And so by being, you know, out there with our own faces and being accountable, and for people within our community to have someone to speak to and see, okay, I understand this is what they're creating, this is who they are, this is what they're building, we're beginning to take that step forwards. And of course, this is also what, you know, we hope everyone else can have as well, and we really want to promote that visibility across the board. And so we've started with ourselves and our own avatars, and using our own avatars to lead into our first NFT drop as well, and building out a storyline in which we can again have more of a face front conversation with our audience and our community. So again, it's not, you know, someone somewhere behind a tech company or brand that's hidden away, but this is who we are.
It's also about, I guess, humanizing technology and understanding it properly. As we see, NFTs are going to be, you know, only becoming commodity for all of us. We actually want our community to have ownership. As we are releasing our first NFT collection, it's not only that you buy something of value, but you actually own something that you can then, you know, take on to take another life, you know, whether it's your investment, whether it's co-creating with us, it's almost a token to a new world, a new way of experiencing fashion. So it's not just from the point of commerce, but for a form of engagement as well in the future.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and just also thinking again about that piece on craftsmanship and art and value, is that so often with the internet and social media, everything, there's just a proliferation of everything all at once, and it's really overwhelming. And again, we don't really get to see behind the scenes, and so that's again, what we're aiming to do by building the story around the brand and giving true value as well to people to actually grasp onto something and see, you know what, this is not just a fleeting moment here, but this is something where I can see myself in. And, you know, maybe if you don't see yourselves there, we need to have a conversation and improve that. But yeah.
Great. Well, I want to leave enough time for any questions from the audience. So with the 10 minutes that we have left, does anyone want to ask a question to any of our panelists? Great. We've got someone right over here.
Thanks very much. It's been absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate all of the views that people have shared and some of the fantastic
Can you hold the mic closer?
insights.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me? Thank you, was what I said. What I wanted to ask was, so obviously all of the themes that you're talking about in terms of inclusivity and engagement and building communities in this new construct, how do you make sure that those who aren't internet enabled aren't left behind? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, like I think that's such a good question. I'm so happy you asked that because I think there's so much potential for this to come out of the internet. Like I think there's so much potential. Like I think like, I don't know, I think Instagram should have a CO2 counter that every time you save CO2 you can plant trees. Like I really believe that there are so many opportunities for the internet to stop being just about the metaverse and what all these kind of online spaces to have reflections in reality, and it not just to be about sometimes it feels like it's like stocks and shares. Sometimes it feels like it's about owning a part of a site and not owning a part of another site, and feeling exclusive because you got invited to one, and other people feeling left out. But I feel that often these spaces can be the foundation to build an actual building, to build an actual environment that allows kind of conversations like this, allow people to actually come in and see what kind of tech is here, what is actually happening, what tech is useful for us to use, and how have we not thought about the kind of technology we're using. The more people using technology, and people often ask me, where does your aesthetic come from? And I say, I've never been given a chance to do anything, and so it's just new to you. And so the more time we give people with the technology that we're all learning to use ourselves and we're all figuring out, and to be honest, a lot of us, we're all confused and we're all figuring it out. And it's just about what technology you have in your hands. But I feel like, imagine if CogX had a constant space all year round that every school would go and visit and play with the brand new tech all the time. And I feel like that is what's missing right now in terms of the metaverse and in terms of NFTs. It's that real world kind of accountability and that real world building. Like, use these things as a foundation to then put technology in people's hands, as you said, who don't have it.
And Jude, you wanted to respond on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I want to pick up on dystopianness for a minute as well, because I totally agree with you that the thing that gives you stamina is kind of optimism and joy. And everything I do in the WOW festivals all over the world is basically just saying, look how far we've come and look how far we could go, and the potential's incredible. And that makes you excited and happy and powerful. So it doesn't help to kind of constantly go, it's shit. It's all shit, and it's going to get worse. So I'm not going to say however. It was very interesting watching vaccine rollout. We know that for the world to be protected, vaccines have to be across the whole world. And we've also noticed that actually it's being hoarded in the countries that are rich. And we have exactly the same this is a metaphor for generosity generally. It will not help the world to have digital illiteracy. It won't help the world to have digital poverty in parts of the world where malnutrition physically exists and where you'll then have digital malnutrition. And we know that. So this is about, you know, are we psychologically prepared to divest ourselves of hoarding and make ourselves digitally generous? And the only way that can happen, actually, to be honest, is by societies lobbying people who don't want that to happen and making it impossible for them to do that hoarding. And that is about civil determination to change a different world. And the more people who are involved in, you know, the metaverse, well, it's just basically the world, saying that and insisting on it, then the more likely we are to do that kind of bringing together. It takes 3 generations for malnutrition to get out of the body. Wow. And I believe it will be exactly the same for education and digital knowledge. So, there's no time to waste.
Actually, I just wanted to reflect on a on a really nice thing that happened to us. So when we did the show at the V&A, it was really, obviously it was in the UK, so it was still a different context, but a lot of the generation and the people who were coming to our show really weren't spending time even on social media. And so it was really beautiful because obviously people would be able to engage with the physical piece as well as a digital element from that physical piece, and people would get really excited. And a lady came up to us and said, "This is great. So where's the metaverse? Where can we go? Where can we enter?" So
The exact precise location.
really. So that was really beautiful because I think kind of to put that excitement and positive spin on it again is for us to always go back and have those physical shows and exhibitions. And I think internationally as well, it's so important to invite people in and make sure that they can see that physical and digital duality and give them something that, I suppose, something hopeful and something that they even want to enter.
Where they see their own story.
Exactly.
Being able to exist.
Exactly.
That's what the context of this session's about, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for doing that. Any other questions? I saw a hand shoot up, but I cannot see where you are. Yes. So, can somebody get this gentleman a microphone? Beautiful.
I was wondering, as someone with a disability, would I be a traitor to my illness or myself or other people with that condition if I didn't reflect that on the metaverse?
That's a great question.
It's very.
We almost could do an entire panel on that. We skipped some of those
Very
questions.
important.
I'm so glad you asked it.
Yeah.
And you know what? I would like to ask that question to you because you have the disability and we don't, and that's the whole point. You should have the voice. So what would you think? What do you think? Like, I don't want to take up your space. That is your space. Apologies to put you on the spot. Oh, can we give the mic
Can
back?
we give him a mic back so he can...
I guess I probably would show it, but I think a lot of people would want to maybe be perceived just as, hidden.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to add to that because I actually have an invisible disability. So when you saw the avatar earlier, my disability affects my lymphatic system. So I actually included my lymphatic system coming out of my avatar, and it actually being something that's really empowering and beautiful to me. So that's the way that I think about my own my own disability. There's a really, I don't know if everyone relates to this, obviously, because everyone has their own experience with disability, but I remember there's this quote from a Marvel film, which is mutant and proud. And I don't know, I kind of love that. I was like, well, you can't see it, but I feel it, and I'm going to make it visible in the metaverse or in my digital avatar form, and I'm going to be proud of it. And it's going to be something beautiful and empowering.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that question gets to the very heart of a complexity about identity, because I remember, years ago working with an artist called Q, a black writer, who said, I can go online and nobody knows I'm black, and I can enter spaces that, I would never normally be allowed into, and I can choose if I'm black or not for the purposes of the conversations. And he said that this was incredibly liberating. But I can also see, but then he knew the world that he was operating in had closed off spaces for him. And sometimes he chose to kind of attack that, and sometimes he chose to make himself just work within it. And I think, for example, if I was to go into a space, should I be a man sometimes? Because I would definitely have a bigger voice. And, should I... Yeah, so I think that idea of the politics of playing with identity is a really fascinating one, because at the moment we can do Botox and false eyelashes, we can do all kinds of stuff to make ourselves look different, and then we are basically told that we're not owning who we are. But then owning who you are in a world where you're segregated, is
or
also
judged
quite
or excluded.
a complicated choice.
Yeah. And I think that is the crux, actually, Paula, of something you were saying, is the way you represent yourself. And I don't think, first of all, anyone should judge anyone for how they represent themselves online. You could represent yourself as an inanimate object if you wanted to. So by all means, lean into that. But I think, Paula, what you said really touched me about how the fact that you chose to represent yourself in the way that your disability became something about you that you could really embrace. And as long as however it is that you choose to represent yourself feels empowering to you, I think that was just really the crux.
Yeah, I think for me it was also about conquering shame and fear, which I think is so deep rooted for so many people. And just twisting that completely and doing that for yourself. And that's what we obviously really hope to do with with showing our avatars, with talking about our avatars, with talking about representation, and even with the pieces that we create. We really want to empower and really, turn those often very hidden and kind of awful emotions into something that is positive.
So on that very beautiful note, I'd like to close our conversation with a sincere thank you to our panelists, Danielle, Alissa, Paula, Jude. But I also want to close with a thank you to our audience, especially actually those of you who are in the majority in your sector or in your organization, because you are what makes this conversation exciting. It is through your empathy and your partnership, regardless of identity or background, that we will get the next 10 years right. We can sit up here talking on stage for ages, but until people listen and make real commitment to action, it doesn't amount to anything. So thank you for listening. Thank you in advance for acting on what you hear. And thank you in perpetuity for working with diverse storytellers to build a better reality.
Thank you.